Sophie Crane was closing a billion-dollar deal when four words shattered her world. "We can't find Livy." Her 8-year-old daughter was gone. Security footage showed Livy deliberately walking out the front gate, small backpack on her shoulders, walking with clear purpose. Then the detective pulled up Livy's tablet search history, and Sophie's knees buckled. Why doesn't my mom love me? How to make your mom want you? Is it normal to always feel alone? And finally, how to find Maria Rodriguez's address. Maria, the housekeeper Sophie had fired 3 days ago over a broken vase. "Your daughter walked 6 miles alone, Mrs. Crane," the detective said quietly, "through downtown to find her." 6 miles, an 8-year-old risking everything. When was the last time you tucked your daughter into bed yourself? Sophie couldn't answer. She couldn't remember. "Your staff says Livy cries for Maria every night. They say Maria is the only person Livy ever talked to." The room spun. Her phone buzzed. Location found. A poor neighborhood Sophie had never visited. What Sophie would discover in that tiny apartment would freeze her completely. The truth would destroy her, and maybe save her. Sophie's hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel of her Mercedes, the leather cold against her palms despite the heated seats. The GPS glowed blue in the darkening evening. Maple Street, Building 4, Apartment 2B, 6.2 miles. 6.2 miles. Her 8-year-old daughter had walked that distance, alone, through a city Sophie had built her empire in, but never truly seen. The engine purred as she pulled away from the police station, Detective Morrison following in his unmarked sedan. The route took her east, away from the gleaming downtown towers where her name adorned the top floor of the tallest building. His questions echoed in the silence of her car. "When was the last time you tucked your daughter into bed yourself?" Sophie had opened her mouth, closed it. The detective's pen had stopped moving, and in that silence, Sophie had felt something crack inside her carefully constructed armor. She still couldn't remember. Not last week, not last month. Had there ever been a first time? "Your staff says Livy cries for Maria every night." Everyone knew. The cook knew. The gardener knew. The nannies knew. Everyone except the one person who should have known everything. The landscape began to change outside her window. The manicured lawns and wrought iron gates of her neighborhood gave way to smaller houses, then apartment buildings, then businesses with barred windows. Sophie had lived in this city for 15 years and had never driven through these streets. But Livy had, on foot, for 3 hours. A busy intersection loomed ahead. 6 lanes of traffic, cars rushing past at 50 miles per hour. No crosswalk for half a block. Sophie's breath caught. Livy would have had to cross this, small, alone, probably scared. She was determined, the detective had said. Determined to find what? A housekeeper Sophie had fired over a broken vase? No. Determined to find the person who loved her. The GPS instructed her to continue straight. Sophie passed a homeless encampment under an overpass. Tents and shopping carts clustered together. A man stood at the corner with a cardboard sign. Sophie's stomach turned. Livy had walked past this. An 8-year-old girl in her private school uniform, backpack on her shoulders, walking past dangers Sophie had spent her life insulating herself from. What kind of desperation drove a child through this? The answer whispered in her mind, the kind you created. This story makes us wonder, how many moments have we missed while chasing what we thought mattered? If you've ever questioned whether you're truly present in the lives of the people who need you most, you're not alone. Subscribe to join a community exploring these hard questions together, because the stories that challenge us are often the ones that change us. Now, back to Sophie's journey. 3 miles in, the GPS showed a stop Livy had made, a convenience store with a faded awning and bars on the windows. Sophie pulled into the parking lot, sat staring at the entrance. Her phone buzzed. Detective Morrison. Everything okay? She texted back, just a minute. Inside, the store smelled like old coffee and cleaning solution. A tired-looking man stood behind bulletproof glass at the register. He glanced up and his eyes widened slightly. "You're that CEO," he said. "The one from the news. They found your daughter?" Sophie's throat tightened. "Yes, the GPS shows she stopped here." The man's weathered face softened. "Sweet kid. Came in around 1 o'clock. Asked if I had a map. I said nobody uses paper maps anymore. Asked her what she needed. What did she say? Asked how to get to Maple Street. I told her it was too far to walk, especially for a little girl alone. Tried to get her to call someone." He shook his head. "She said, I have to. Someone needs me." The words hit Sophie like a physical blow. She gripped the counter to steady herself. "I gave her directions," the man continued, guilt in his voice. "Told her to be careful. I should have called the police, shouldn't I?" Sophie couldn't speak. She shook her head, managed, "You were kind to her. Thank you." Back in her car, Sophie sat with those words echoing. Someone needs me. Livy hadn't run away for herself. She thought Maria needed her, an 8-year-old child walking through danger and traffic and fear because she thought someone she loved might be hurting. When had Sophie last put anyone's needs before her own convenience? The realization settled into her chest like a stone. This child, her daughter, had more empathy, more courage, more capacity for love than Sophie had ever demonstrated. Livy had risked everything to comfort someone who'd been fired. Sophie had fired that someone without a second thought. The remaining 3 miles passed in a blur of strip malls and auto shops, laundromats and dollar stores. The buildings grew smaller, older, closer together. This was where Maria lived, where she'd returned after 8 years of caring for Sophie's daughter. After being dismissed like trash over a broken vase, this was where Livy had been headed with such determination that nothing, not distance, not danger, not fear, could stop her. Maple Street appeared on her right. The GPS announced, "Destination ahead on left." Sophie turned onto a street lined with modest apartment buildings. Not slums. The buildings were clean, well-maintained, but worlds away from the mansion Livy called home. Children played on the sidewalk, their laughter carrying through Sophie's closed windows. A community garden flourished in a vacant lot. People sat on stoops, talking, watching their kids. Livy had walked to this, had chosen this over the 12,000 square foot showpiece Sophie had bought to prove her success. Building 4 stood 3 stories tall, beige stucco with blue trim. Geraniums bloomed in window boxes. A hand-painted sign read, "Welcome." Sophie pulled into a parking spot and turned off the engine. The GPS glowed. "You have arrived." But she couldn't move. Her hands stayed locked on the steering wheel, her chest tight with something she hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not the fear that Livy was in danger. The detective had confirmed she was safe. This was different, deeper. This was the fear that she'd arrive at that apartment and discover the truth she'd been running from her entire adult life. That all her success, all her achievements, all her wealth meant nothing because she'd failed at the only thing that truly mattered. Detective Morrison's sedan pulled up beside her. He got out, walked to her window. She lowered it. "Mrs. Crane, ready?" Sophie looked up at Building 4, Apartment 2B. Behind one of those windows with the geraniums, her daughter waited. The daughter who thought her own mother wouldn't notice she was gone. The daughter who'd walked 6 miles through a dangerous city to find the only person who'd ever truly seen her. Sophie opened her car door, her legs unsteady as she stood. Her designer heels felt ridiculous on the cracked pavement. Everything about her felt wrong here. Her $1,000 suit, her perfect hair, her carefully maintained image of success. She'd spent her entire life building an empire, and her daughter had walked 6 miles to escape it. They approached the building entrance. The detective held the door. Sophie stepped into a small lobby, clean tile, mailbox on one wall, stairs leading up, no elevator. Second floor, Detective Morrison said gently. Apartment 2B. Sophie began climbing. Each step felt heavier than the last. At the second floor landing, she could hear voices, laughter, a woman's voice, warm and patient, a child's giggle, Livy's giggle. Sophie froze, one hand on the railing. When was the last time she'd heard her daughter laugh like that? Free and genuine and full of joy? She couldn't remember, and that truth was more devastating than anything the detective had revealed. Apartment 2B was at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, voices drifting out. Sophie could see movement inside, someone setting a table, domesticity and warmth radiating from that small space. Her phone buzzed, a text from her CFO. Board wants emergency meeting. Stock dropped fresh on the news. Call ASAP. Sophie stared at the message. 24 hours ago, that text would have sent her into immediate action. Her company, her reputation, her carefully constructed image of the woman who had it all. She turned off her phone. Detective Morrison stood beside her, patient and quiet. Mrs. Crane, he said softly. Ready? Sophie looked at that partially open door. Behind it, the truth waited, the evidence of everything she'd missed. Everything she'd sacrificed, everything she'd lost while congratulating herself on her success. Behind that door, her daughter waited. But would Livy want to come home? The question that had haunted her during the entire drive crystallized into words she could barely whisper. What if she doesn't want to come home with me? Detective Morrison's expression gentled with something that might have been pity. He didn't answer because they both knew there was no comfort he could offer. The only answer waited behind that door. Sophie took a breath and stepped forward, raising her hand to knock. Sophie's knock echoed in the hallway. 3 sharp raps that sounded too loud, too aggressive. The laughter inside stopped. Footsteps approached. The door opened. Maria Rodriguez stood in the doorway, calm and dignified. No fear, no eagerness to please. Just steady assessment from a woman who had every right to slam the door in Sophie's face. Mrs. Crane, Maria said simply. Behind Maria, Sophie could see into the small apartment, and there, on a worn couch, sat Livy, her daughter's head snapped up. For one brief moment, Livy's face lit with joy, the automatic response of a child seeing her mother. Then something else crossed her features. The light dimmed. Her smile faltered. Fear. Her daughter was afraid of her. I'm here for Livy, Sophie said, her voice coming out harder than intended. CEO voice, boardroom voice. Maria didn't move from the doorway. She's safe, Mrs. Crane, Maria said quietly. She's been safe all along. The words hung between them, loaded with unspoken meaning. No thanks to you. Sophie's instinct was to push past, to assert her authority. This was her daughter. But something in Maria's steady gaze stopped her. May I come in? Sophie asked instead, the words foreign on her tongue. Maria studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. The apartment was tiny. Sophie's closet was probably larger. But where her mansion felt like a museum, this small space radiated warmth. The smell of cooking filled the air. Children's drawings decorated the refrigerator. A worn couch sat against one wall, a crocheted blanket draped over the back. On that couch, Livy sat next to another girl, older, maybe 10, with Maria's dark eyes. They had homework spread between them, comfortable and close, like sisters. Livy, Sophie breathed. Her daughter stood slowly, uncertain. Hi, Mommy. The words sounded strange, formal, like a title rather than a relationship. Sophie wanted to rush forward, to grab her daughter and hold her, but Livy's body language stopped her, the way she angled toward Maria, seeking protection from her own mother. Are you okay? Sophie asked. I'm fine, Livy said quietly. Maria took care of me. Maria took care of me. Of course she did. Maria had been taking care of Livy for 8 years. Sophie's eyes swept the apartment, and that's when she saw it. The wall. The entire wall opposite the couch was covered, absolutely covered, with Livy's life. Sophie took a step closer, her breath catching. Photographs, hundreds of them, arranged chronologically. A timeline of a childhood Sophie had paid for but never witnessed. Newborn Livy. 6-month-old Livy laughing in Maria's arms. Livy's first wobbly steps. Maria's hands outstretched to catch her. First birthday, chocolate cake smeared on her face. Every milestone Sophie had missed, Maria had documented, had cherished. Between the photographs, Livy's artwork, finger paintings from toddlerhood, progressing to crayon drawings, then watercolors. A child's artistic journey preserved like museum pieces. Achievement certificates. Student of the Month. Outstanding Reader. Kindness Award. Accomplishments Sophie had never celebrated. And in the center, a large handmade calendar. Each month decorated with stickers and drawings. Each date filled with Maria's neat handwriting. Sophie stepped closer, her hands beginning to tremble. January 12th, Livy's first word, Mama. She was looking at me. Mrs. Crane was on conference call with Tokyo. Sophie's eyes filled with tears, her daughter's first word, and she'd been talking to strangers. July 15th, first steps, Livy walked across the kitchen to me. 10 steps all on her own. Mrs. Crane in Singapore for business trip. August 3rd, lost first tooth. Wanted to show Mrs. Crane first. Mrs. Crane didn't come home until 11 p.m. Livy already asleep. September 20th, Livy asked if I could come to parent duty at school. Mrs. Crane sent assistant with camera. Livy cried after. December 25th, Christmas morning. Livy opened gifts alone. Mrs. Crane on conference call with London. I made hot chocolate. We watched movies. Livy asked why mommies don't stay. Each entry was a small devastation. Each one a moment Sophie had traded for success. Her knees weakened. She reached out to steady herself, her fingers touching construction paper. A school project. My hero written in careful child's handwriting at the top. My hero is Maria. Maria makes me breakfast and knows I don't like eggs. Maria helps with homework and doesn't get mad when I don't understand. Maria hugs me when I'm scared and tells me I'm special. Maria comes to my school, plays, and cheers the loudest. I want to be like Maria when I grow up because she has the biggest heart. Not a single mention of Sophie. Next to it, my family tree. Livy had drawn a large tree, and in the center, where parents typically went, was a carefully drawn portrait labeled Maria. Sophie's photo was there too, but on a distant branch, small and separate, like a distant relative. The third project destroyed her completely. What I want to be when I grow up. I want to be kind like Maria. I want to help people like she helps me. I want to make people feel safe and loved like she does. Maria says the most important thing is not how much money you have, but how much love you give. I want to give lots of love because Maria taught me how. Sophie couldn't breathe. All this time, 8 years, while Sophie had been building her empire, Maria had been building Livy's world, had been the constant presence, the safe harbor, the love Livy needed. And Sophie had fired her over a vase. Mrs. Crane? Maria's voice, soft and without malice. Sophie turned, tears streaming uncontrolled. Would you like some tea? Maria asked, offering hospitality to the woman who'd dismissed her like trash 3 days ago. The grace in that simple offer broke something in Sophie's chest. I didn't know, Sophie whispered. I didn't know any of this. I didn't know my own daughter. Maria said nothing, because what could she say? It was simply, devastatingly true. Livy appeared at Sophie's elbow, small and uncertain. "Are you okay, Mommy?" The concern in her voice, this child worried about the mother who'd never worried about her, was more than Sophie could bear. "No, baby," Sophie choked out. "I'm not okay. Are you, are you okay?" Livy glanced at Maria, seeking guidance. Maria gave a small nod. "I'm okay," Livy said quietly. "I was scared when I was walking, but I knew Maria would keep me safe when I got here." Maria would keep me safe. Not home, not her mother. Maria. Sophie sank into a wooden kitchen chair and put her face in her hands. She'd built $1 billion empire. She'd shattered glass ceilings. She'd been profiled in Forbes and Fortune, and she'd lost her daughter without even noticing she was gone. Maria moved to the small kitchen, filling a kettle with water. The simple act, caring for a guest even in crisis, felt surreal. Detective Morrison touched Sophie's shoulder. "I'll give you some privacy," he said quietly, stepping into the hallway. The click of the latch felt final. Now it was just Sophie, Maria, Livy, and the truth. On the coffee table, partially hidden under a cookbook, Sophie noticed a journal. Leather-bound, worn at the edges, Maria's handwriting visible on the open page. Maria followed her gaze. "You can read it if you want," she said simply. No defensiveness, just an offering of truth. Sophie reached for it with trembling hands. The journal fell open to recent entries. Maria's careful handwriting filled each page. Not a diary of her own life, but a chronicle of Livy's. January 15th, Livy asked me today why her mommy doesn't hug her. I didn't know what to say. I just held her until she stopped crying. She fell asleep in my arms. Sophie's vision blurred. March 3rd, Mrs. Crane missed Livy's birthday again. Another emergency at work. Livy blew out her candles alone with me in the kitchen. She made a wish and wouldn't tell me what it was. But I know, she wishes for the same thing every year. May 20th, Livy had a nightmare tonight. She called for me, not her mother. I sat with her until dawn. My heart breaks for this child. She tries so hard to be perfect, thinking maybe then her mother will notice her. The kettle whistled. Maria poured hot water over tea bags, the mundane action a stark contrast to the devastation in Sophie's hands. July 2nd, Livy asked me today if I could be her real mother. She said it so simply. "Maria, could you be my real mommy instead?" I told her she already has a mother who loves her very much. But as I said it, I wondered if I was lying. Sophie's hand shook so hard she nearly dropped the journal. September 13th. Mrs. Crane fired me today over a broken vase. 8 years and I'm dismissed like trash. But my heart is breaking for Livy. Who will hold her when she cries? Who will know she's afraid of thunderstorms? Who will love her the way she deserves? Sophie looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Where is she?" Sophie whispered. "Where's Livy?" Maria's eyes glistened with tears too. "Sleeping in the bedroom with Rosa." Sophie stood on unsteady legs and crossed to the partially open bedroom door. The room was barely big enough for the twin bed it contained, but it was warm, decorated with Livy's artwork, a nightlight shaped like a star casting soft shadows. On the bed, 2 girls slept. Rosa had her arm protectively around Livy, curled together like they'd done this 100 times before. Livy clutched a stuffed rabbit, worn and loved. Sophie had never seen that rabbit before. She didn't know her daughter had a favorite stuffed animal. Maria appeared beside her, voice barely a whisper. "She walked 6 miles, Mrs. Crane, alone, through busy streets, past strangers, through dangerous neighborhoods." Sophie couldn't speak. "An 8-year-old baby," Maria continued, voice heavy with pain, "risking everything, because she needed her mother." Maria paused, and her next words shattered what remained of Sophie's composure. "And I'm the only mother she's ever really known." At that moment, Livy stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused with sleep. Then she saw Sophie standing in the doorway. Fear. Mommy? Livy's voice was small, uncertain. You, you came? The surprise in her daughter's voice, the genuine shock that Sophie had shown up, hit like a physical blow. Sophie tried to speak, but her throat had closed. Livy sat up carefully. She looked at Sophie with wide eyes, and then she said the words that would haunt Sophie forever. I thought you wouldn't notice I was gone. Pause for just a moment. That line, I thought you wouldn't notice I was gone, carries a weight many of us recognize, whether we've said it, heard it, or feared it. If this story is stirring something in you, consider subscribing. Not for more content, but for more conversations that matter, stories that remind us what we're really building with our lives. Let's continue. Sophie froze, completely, utterly froze. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Livy continued, her voice so innocent, so honest. You're always in meetings. I didn't think you'd have time to look for me. I thought maybe you'd just hire someone to do it. The accuracy of that statement, that Livy understood her mother well enough to predict exactly how she'd handle a crisis, was more than Sophie could bear. Her knees gave out, not graceful, not controlled. She simply collapsed, all strength draining from her body, and found herself on her knees on Maria's worn carpet, sobbing, not quiet, controlled tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere she'd locked away years ago. Her perfect image, her controlled demeanor, all of it shattered. The billionaire CEO, reduced to a broken woman on her knees. Mommy? Livy's voice, confused, frightened. Mommy, why are you crying? Sophie looked up through tears, and all she could see was truth. This beautiful, empathetic, brave child who'd risked everything to comfort someone else, who'd learned to exist quietly so as not to inconvenience her mother, who'd walk 6 miles because she'd internalized that work mattered more than safety. Sophie had taught her that. Because you're right, Sophie choked out. Because you're absolutely right, baby. I failed you. I failed you in every way that matters. And I'm so sorry. Livy climbed off the bed, moved towards Sophie with careful steps. It's okay, Mommy, she said, trying to comfort her own mother. No, Sophie said firmly, looking into her daughter's eyes. No, baby, it's not okay. You shouldn't have to walk 6 miles to find love. You shouldn't have to wonder if I'd noticed you were gone. Maria knelt beside Sophie, offering grace Sophie didn't deserve. Mrs. Crane, Maria said gently, Livy needs you to be strong now. Sophie looked at Maria, this woman who'd given everything while Sophie had given nothing. How? Sophie's voice broke. How do I fix what I've broken? How do I fix 8 years of absence? Maria's eyes held sadness and something else, maybe hope. The same way you build anything worthwhile, Maria said softly. One day at a time, by being present. Sophie pulled Livy into her arms, awkward at first because she didn't even know how her daughter liked to be held, but Livy melted into her, small body shaking with confused tears. I'm here now, Sophie whispered into her daughter's hair. I'm here and I'm not leaving. Not for work, not for anything. I promise you, Livy, I promise. She didn't know if it was a promise she could keep, didn't know if she could become the mother Livy deserved after 8 years of absence. But looking at Maria's face, seeing the quiet hope there, the belief that even this could be repaired, Sophie knew she would spend the rest of her life trying. Sophie sat on Maria's worn couch, Livy perched uncertainly in her lap. It was the first time in years, maybe ever, that Sophie had held her daughter like this. Livy's body was stiff at first, unused to her mother's embrace, but slowly she relaxed, her small frame settling against Sophie's chest. The detective had left. It was just the 3 of them now in the weight of 8 lost years. Tell me, Sophie said, her voice raw from crying. Tell me everything I missed, everything I did wrong. Maria hesitated, pouring tea into the mismatched mugs. Mrs. Crane, I don't think... Please, Sophie's voice cracked. I need to understand. I need to know what I've done to her. Maria sat down slowly, her hands wrapped around her mug. She looked at Livy as if asking permission. Livy gave a small nod. Livy's first word was, Mama, Maria began quietly. She was looking at me. You were on a conference call with Tokyo. I tried to tell you later, but you were already on the next call. Sophie's arms tightened around Livy. She learned to walk in my kitchen while I made lunch. You were in Milan for 2 weeks. When you came home, she could already walk. You'd missed it completely. Each word was a small death. Her first day of kindergarten, she was terrified, cried all morning. You sent the driver. I held her hand and walked her to the classroom. She had chicken pox when she was 4. You were closing a merger. I sat with her for 3 days while she cried from the itching. You came home once, looked in on her while she was sleeping, then left for another meeting. Sophie felt Livy's breathing against her chest, steady and small. Last Christmas, she made you a card, spent hours on it with glitter and stickers and drawings. You put it on your desk, you never opened it. Her school play in May, she had the lead role. She practiced her lines with me every night for 2 months. You sent your assistant with flowers. Livy cried backstage because all the other kids' parents were there. Maria's voice grew quieter. 2 months ago, kids at school bullied her, called her the robot's daughter because you're never at pickup. She came home crying. I held her. You were in a meeting. Sophie couldn't speak. Each revelation was a knife blade. It's okay, Mommy, Livy said softly, her small hand patting Sophie's arm. I know your work is important. No, Sophie's voice was fierce. No, baby, nothing is more important than you. Nothing. I was wrong. So wrong. She looked at Maria and asked the question she dreaded most. Does she love you more than me? Maria's eyes filled with compassion. Mrs. Crane, Livy doesn't know you well enough to know if she loves you. The truth was somehow worse than Sophie had imagined. Not that Livy loved Maria more, but that Sophie was essentially a stranger to her own daughter. Livy, Sophie whispered, why did you come here? Why did you walk all that way? Livy looked up at her mother with those honest eyes. When you fired Maria, I thought she might be sad. I wanted to make sure she was okay. Sophie's breath caught. You thought Maria needed you. Livy nodded. She takes care of me. I wanted to take care of her. This 8-year-old child had risked everything, not for herself, but to comfort someone else. She'd shown more empathy, more selflessness, more love than Sophie had demonstrated in her entire adult life. Weren't you scared? Sophie asked, walking all that way alone? Yes, Livy said simply, but Maria needed me. You taught me that work is more important than being scared, that important things come first. The words hit Sophie like a sledgehammer. Livy had learned her values, Sophie's twisted priorities, and applied them, had deprioritized her own safety because something important mattered more. Sophie had taught her daughter that love came second. She looked at Maria, this woman who'd been everything Sophie should have been. Will you come back? Sophie asked. Please, not as an employee, as family. Help me learn how to be Livy's mother. I don't know how, but I want to learn. Maria, would you? Please. Livy's hopeful voice nearly broke Sophie's heart. Maria looked at both of them, weighing something in her mind. Finally, she spoke. On one condition, Mrs. Crane. Anything. You have to show up, really show up, not just physically, but emotionally, consistently. Maria's voice was gentle but firm. I won't watch Livy's heart break again. If you make promises you can't keep, it will be worse than if you'd never tried. Sophie met Maria's eyes. I promise. I swear to you, I will change. I'll do whatever it takes. Outside, sudden brightness flooded through the window. Camera flashes. Voices shouted questions. Car doors slammed. Maria pulled back the curtain slightly. The media's here. Sophie's phone buzzed with text. Her PR team, her assistant, her board members. The story had leaked. The billionaire CEO whose daughter ran away. The scandal, the judgment. 24 hours ago, this would have been Sophie's worst nightmare. Now, looking at Livy in her arms, in Maria's cautious hope, Sophie realized the media circus outside was nothing compared to what she'd almost lost. Let them wait, Sophie said quietly. Right now, I'm exactly where I need to be. The moment Sophie opened Maria's apartment door, camera flashes exploded like lightning. A wall of reporters surged forward, microphones thrust out, voices shouting over each other. Mrs. Crane, is it true your daughter ran away? Sophie, where has Livy been? Is this the housekeeper you recently fired? Sophie's instinct kicked in immediately. Years of media training, countless press conferences, the carefully honed skill of controlling the narrative. Her mind was already forming the statement, a misunderstanding, a miscommunication. Everything's fine now. Thank you for your concern. Protect the image. Protect the brand. Protect the empire. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Her PR team, her assistant, her board members, all waiting for her to spin this, to salvage what could be salvaged. But then Sophie looked down. Livy stood beside her, small and frightened, shrinking back from the cameras and chaos. Her daughter's hand clutched Maria's tightly, not Sophie's. Maria's. Even now, even after everything, Livy sought comfort from the woman who'd always been there, not the mother who'd just promised to change. A reporter pushed closer. Mrs. Crane, what happened? Where was Livy? Sophie opened her mouth. The polished statement waited on her tongue. Instead, the truth came out. My daughter ran away because I failed her as a mother. Shocked silence rippled through the crowd. Cameras stopped clicking for a brief, stunned moment. Somewhere behind the reporter, Sophie could see her PR director's face, pale with horror. This was career suicide, public relations disaster. Everything they'd built, destroyed in one sentence. But Sophie kept talking. I was so focused on building my company that I neglected to build a relationship with my own child. Her voice grew stronger. She walked 6 miles, alone and afraid, through a dangerous city, to find the one person who actually showed her love. She gestured to Maria, our housekeeper, whom I had fired 3 days ago. The reporters erupted with questions, but Sophie raised her hand. I'm saying this because other parents need to hear it. Success means nothing if you lose your children. She looked directly into the nearest camera. I nearly lost mine, and I deserve to. A reporter managed to break through. Mrs. Crane, what will you do now? Sophie looked down at Livy, who stared up at her with wan, uncertain eyes. I'm going to learn to be her mother, Sophie said simply. However long it takes. The journey back to the mansion was quiet. Livy had insisted that Maria and Rosa come with them, and now the 4 of them sat in Sophie's Mercedes, Livy sandwiched between Maria and Sophie in the back seat, but Livy's body angled toward Maria. When the car hit a bump, she leaned into Maria's side. When Maria's phone buzzed, Livy looked up at her with concern. The ease between them was natural, practiced, real. Sophie noticed everything now. Every small gesture she'd missed for 8 years. Every unconscious choice Livy made that showed where her heart had found home. When they pulled up to the mansion, Rosa's eyes went wide. Wow, the 10-year-old breathed, staring at the illuminated fountain, the manicured grounds, the house that looked more like a museum than a home. Livy glanced at her apologetically. It's big, but it's not very cozy. 8 words from an 8-year-old that cut through everything Sophie had spent 15 years building. Her daughter understood what Sophie had never grasped. A house wasn't a home just because it was expensive. That night, Sophie stood outside Livy's bedroom door, hesitant. I'd like to put you to bed, she said softly to her daughter, but I don't know how you like it done. Livy looked at Maria, seeking guidance. Maria nodded gently. Could Mommy watch tonight, Maria suggested, so she can learn? Livy considered this, then nodded. Sophie watched as Maria moved through a routine so practiced it was clearly performed every night for years. Specific pajamas, the soft blue ones with stars, not the expensive silk set Sophie had bought. 3 books, always 3, stacked in a particular order on the nightstand. Maria read each one with different voices, making Livy giggle. Then a song, soft, in Spanish, a lullaby Sophie had never heard. Maria's hands smoothed Livy's hair in a specific pattern. The blankets tucked just so, tight around her feet because Livy liked to feel secure. Finally, a kiss on the forehead and the words, "See you in sunshine, my love. See you in sunshine." Livy echoed pretty sleepily. Sophie's eyes burned with tears. This whole world had existed right under her roof, and she'd never known it. After Livy fell asleep, Sophie and Maria stood in the hallway, the mansion quiet around them. Teach me, Sophie said, everything, not just bedtime, everything about her. What makes her laugh, what scares her, how she likes her breakfast, all of it. Maria studied her. Mrs. Crane, it takes time. I have time. Sophie's voice was firm. I'm stepping down as CEO. Maria's eyes widened. What? I'll stay on the board, but someone else can run day-to-day operations. I built a company for 8 years. I'm going to spend the next 10 rebuilding my relationship with my daughter. For the first time, Maria smiled, small but genuine. Then yes, Mrs. Crane, I'll help you. Sophie looked through the crack in Livy's door at her sleeping daughter, peaceful and safe. She'd lost 8 years, but maybe, just maybe, she could still save the rest. In the first week, smoke filled the kitchen. Sophie stood at the stove, staring at blackened pancakes stuck to the pan, the fire alarm shrieking overhead. It's okay, Mommy, Livy said from the doorway, her voice kind but resigned. Maria can make breakfast. No. Sophie turned off the stove, waving a towel at the alarm until it stopped. I want to learn. Maria, will you show me? Maria smiled patiently and pulled out a fresh pan. Strawberry faces, Livy's favorite. Sophie watched carefully as Maria demonstrated the right heat, the right amount of batter, the strawberries arranged to make a smiling face. When Sophie tried again, her pancake was lopsided and the face looked more confused than happy. But Livy giggled. It was a start. 2 weeks later, Sophie pulled up to the elementary school drop-off line, hands gripping the steering wheel. Other parents stared. Some recognized her from the news. Others simply wondered why the billionaire CEO was doing carpool. You don't have to, Mommy, Livy said quietly, clearly embarrassed. The driver can. I want to, Sophie interrupted gently. Is that okay? Livy hesitated, then nodded. Okay. As her daughter walked toward the school entrance, she turned back once, checking if Sophie was still there. Sophie waved. Livy smiled, small, uncertain, but real. 3 weeks later, the teacher's eyes widened when Sophie walked into the parent-teacher conference. Mrs. Crane, I didn't expect you to actually come. I'm here, Sophie said simply, and I'd like to volunteer for the fundraiser, whatever you need. The teacher blinked, speechless. A month later, the therapist's office was small and comfortable. Nothing like the cold perfection of Sophie's world. Sophie, Livy, and sometimes Maria sat together, navigating the wreckage of their relationship. Livy, the therapist asked gently, how do you feel about the changes at home? Livy picked at the edge of a throw pillow. Mommy's around more, she paused, but I'm waiting to see if it lasts. The words hit Sophie like a punch. 2 months of trying, and her daughter still didn't trust it was real. How do I prove it? Sophie asked the therapist desperately. You don't prove it, Mrs. Crane. You show up, consistently, for years. Trust isn't rebuilt with grand gestures. It's rebuilt with 1,000 small moments of presence. 3 months later, Sophie, we need you back full time, her CFO insisted during the board meeting. The Tokyo deal is falling apart. No one else can. Sophie felt the old pull, the adrenaline, the importance, the empire she'd built. Her phone buzzed, or a photo from Maria, Livy in a soccer uniform on a field Sophie didn't recognize. Sophie's stomach dropped. The soccer game. She'd forgotten. She stood abruptly. I have somewhere I need to be. Sophie, the Tokyo deal. We'll wait, Sophie said, grabbing her bag. Or it won't. Either way, and I'm not missing this. She walked out of the boardroom, her CFO's stunned face behind her. 20 minutes later, Sophie ran across a public park soccer field, her heels sinking into the grass. Parents turned to stare, but Sophie's eyes were locked on Livy, who just received the ball. Livy dribbled forward, focused and determined. She shot. Goal. The small crowd cheered. Livy turned, searching the sidelines automatically for Maria, and froze when she saw Sophie instead. Mommy, she breathed. You came. I came, Sophie said, her voice thick. I'll always come, baby. Always. Livy ran to her, throwing small arms around Sophie's waist, and for the first time, Sophie felt her daughter hold on like she meant it. Now it is the 4th month. Rosa's 10th birthday party filled the mansion with genuine warmth for the first time. Nothing extravagant, just pizza, a homemade cake, and children's laughter echoing through rooms that had been silent for too long. Sophie watched Maria with Rosa, the easy affection, the inside jokes, the way Rosa leaned into her mother's side without thinking. You're an amazing mother, Sophie said quietly. Maria smiled. I just show up every day. That's the secret, isn't it? Sophie said. It's not about being perfect. It's just about being there. Yes, Maria said simply. That's all it ever was. 6 months later, Sophie sat on the edge of Livy's bed, 3 books stacked beside her. She read each one with different voices the way Maria had taught her. Then she sang the Spanish lullaby, still badly, still off-key, but with all the love she had never known how to show before. Mommy? Livy's voice was sleepy. Yes, baby? I'm glad you're here. Sophie's throat tightened. Me too, sweetheart. She stood to leave, and then, Mommy? Sophie turned. I love you. 3 words, unprompted, genuine. The first time Livy had said them without being asked in as long as Sophie could remember. Sophie sank back onto the bed, pulling her daughter into her arms, tears streaming down her face. I love you too, Livy. So much. So very much. 3 months later, Sophie stood in a converted warehouse surveying the new Crane Family Foundation headquarters. Childcare centers, parent support groups, flexible work programs, everything she'd wished she'd known she needed years ago. Maria, Sophie said, I want you to run this as director. Maria's eyes widened. Mrs. Crane, I'm not qualified. Aww. You're the most qualified person I know, Sophie said firmly. You raised 2 children while working full time. You know what working parents need. Please. Maria looked at the space, the possibility of helping thousands of families avoid Sophie's mistakes. Yes, she said finally, I'll do it. 1 year had passed since that terrible day when Livy walked 6 miles to find love. 1 year of showing up, of learning, of becoming the mother she should have been all along. Sophie stood in Livy's doorway watching her daughter sleep peacefully and whispered the truth she'd finally learned. You were always the empire worth building. 1 year later, the community center stood in Maria's old neighborhood, its fresh paint gleaming in the afternoon sun. A banner stretched across the entrance. Crane Family Foundation. Grand opening. Sophie stood among the crowd in jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. No designer suit, no power heels, just a woman who'd finally learned what mattered. Mrs. Martinez, she said warmly, greeting an older woman. How's your grandson doing? Did the tutoring help? He made honor roll, Mrs. Martinez beamed. First in our family. That's wonderful, Sophie said and meant it. Maria watched from nearby, a soft smile on her face. You've changed. Sophie turned to her. You taught me how. You and Livy. When it was time for Sophie to speak, she didn't stand behind a podium. She stood in the center of the crowd, on their level, one of them. A year ago, Sophie began, her voice steady, I was a billionaire who had everything except what mattered. Faces turned toward her, listening. I almost lost my daughter because I thought success was measured in dollars and deals. I thought providing meant loving. I thought absence could be compensated with expensive gifts. She found Maria in the crowd. Maria Rodriguez taught me that success is measured in showing up, in being present, in knowing your child's favorite song and what makes them laugh. Livy stood with Rosa near the back, both girls watching Sophie with pride. I spent 8 years building a company, Sophie continued. I'm spending the rest of my life building relationships. Real ones, because that's the only wealth that endures. The crowd applauded, but Sophie barely heard it. She only had eyes for Livy, who mouthed, I love you, Mommy. Sophie's life looked different now. The mansion was gone, sold to a tech executive who probably wouldn't live in it either. Sophie had downsized to what a realtor called a regular luxury home. 5 bedrooms instead of 12, a backyard instead of grounds, a kitchen that actually got used. She worked 3 days a week as a consultant, enough to stay engaged but not consumed. Every Friday, she volunteered at Livy's school. She knew all of Livy's friends by name, knew their parents, showed up for every game and recital and random Tuesday afternoon she could. Wednesday nights were family dinners, Sophie, Livy, Maria, and Rosa around the table, laughter and conversation flowing naturally. They just returned from a real vacation. A week at the beach where Sophie's phone stayed off and her only agenda was building sandcastles with her daughter. Maria ran the foundation now, helping thousands of working parents navigate the impossible balance Sophie had failed at for so long. She lived in a beautiful house 3 blocks from Sophie. Family helps family, Sophie had said, refusing to let Maria refuse the gift. Rosa attended the same private school as Livy. She's Livy's sister in every way that matters, Sophie told anyone who asked. And Livy had transformed from that quiet, lonely child into someone confident and joyful. She called Maria Tia Maria now. She still remembered the pain, still sometimes woke from nightmares about being lost. But she was healing. More importantly, she trusted. Trusted that when she called for her mother, or Sophie would answer. Trusted that love didn't have to be earned through perfection. Trusted that she mattered. That night, Sophie sat at her desk writing in a journal, a habit she'd adopted after reading Maria's, understanding the power of documenting what mattered. Today, Livy came to me first with a problem at school. Not Maria, me. She chose me. A year ago, she didn't trust me enough to tell me anything. Today, I'm the person she turns to. Tomorrow is Livy's 9th birthday. I'm baking the cake myself with Maria's supervision. Some things don't change. I've taken the whole week off. We're going back to the beach, Livy, Maria, Rosa, and me. Our family. I built an empire and nearly lost my soul. Then a woman I dismissed as just the help taught me what real wealth looks like. It looks like Livy's laugh over breakfast. It looks like family dinners where everyone actually talks. It looks like bedtime stories read in silly voices. It looks like showing up, not just physically, but emotionally, consistently, imperfectly, but always. I spent $1 million on Livy's education, healthcare, and things that don't matter. Maria spent time on Livy's heart. Turns out time is the only currency that counts. I'm the richest woman in America. Not because of my bank account. I'm not even in the top 100 anymore, and I don't care. I'm rich because my daughter loves me. because I finally deserve it. Sophie closed the journal and walked quietly to Livy's room. Her daughter slept peacefully, the worn stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, a soft smile on her face. The nightlight cast gentle shadows, the star-shaped one Livy had chosen herself, the one Sophie now knew she preferred because it reminded her of making wishes. Sophie knew so much now, knew that Livy liked her sandwiches cut diagonally, knew she was afraid of thunderstorms but loved rain, knew her favorite color was purple, not pink, knew she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up, knew her daughter's heart. Sophie bent down, kissed Livy's forehead gently, and whispered the words that had become her nightly prayer. "Thank you for giving me another chance, baby girl." She stood in the doorway for a moment longer, watching her daughter breathe, safe and loved and home. The camera of her mind's eye pulled back. This warm house, this healing family, this hard-won love that meant more than any empire ever could. She'd spent 8 years building the wrong thing, but she'd spend the rest of her life building the right one. Sophie spent 8 years building the wrong empire, but she got a second chance, and she took it. We don't all get dramatic wake-up calls, but we all get small moments to choose differently. If stories like this help you see what truly matters, I'd be honored if you subscribed. Together, we're building something more valuable than an audience. We're building awareness of what makes life worth living. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. And most of all, thank you for showing up.